Coming up on Newswatch in Focus, numbers released by the Coles County Sheriff's Office show accidents involving deer made up over half of all accidents they handled last year. We'll talk to the Coles County Sheriff and a wildlife biologist about the deer population and how it's caused some problems for area drivers. And we'll take a look at what made headlines this week on Newswatch. All that and more coming up. Stay tuned. Newswatch in Focus starts now. Welcome and thanks for joining us for Newswatch in Focus. I'm your host, Kate Pleasant. Newswatch in Focus takes an in-depth look at the latest news stories from the greater Mattoon and Charleston area, as well as those surrounding it each week. First, let's take a look at what made headlines on WEIU Newswatch this week. 6 men are facing charges after a home invasion in Kansas last month. The Edgar County Sheriff's Department says a resident reported last month that several men broke into his home and beat him. Deputies say the investigation was complicated due to the number of witnesses and suspects. Dylan Arms of Charleston and Caleb Hunter and Quentin Inman, both of Kansas, are being charged with home invasion and aggravated battery. Cole Lewis, Cameron Minor, and Colin Hunter, all of Kansas, are being charged with conspiracy to commit home invasion and aggravated battery. And a Westfield man is facing charges after the Coles County Sheriff says he took some metal from a local business. The Coles County Sheriff's Office says that Wallace Sanders stole nearly $60,000 worth of copper aluminum sheeting from the R.R. Donnelly printing plant in Mattoon over a 3-year period. Sanders will appear in court for a hearing in July. And if you're planning to take a bike ride in Illinois, you may want to hang up your phone. The Illinois House of Representatives is proposing a bill to ban the use of electronic communication devices while bike riding. The legislation would exclude cyclists who use hands-free mode or are parked on the side of the road. The bill is headed to a House Rules Committee. If you're looking for something to do this summer, you might check out the Charleston Community Band. Weekly concerts are now underway on Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. in Kiwanis Park. Admission is free, and it's recommended that you bring your lawn chair. And staying in Charleston, the Charleston Carnegie Public Library has extended its hours and will now be open 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Library officials say the extension is possible due to reduced operating costs and more efficient staff scheduling. And on top of extending their hours, the library will also be hosting a summer reading program that runs through July 29th. The program is for all ages and offers prizes for those completing 2 hours of reading per week. No library card is required to participate in the free program. And the Effingham Village Square Mall continues to face financial difficulties after its water was recently shut off. Earlier this year, the mall had problems paying a nearly $30,000 electric bill. Now it's a water bill. Effingham building officials say the water was shut off last Thursday morning because the mall's bill had gone unpaid for a month. Management staff at the mall paid the late bill within an hour of getting the notice, but some stores were forced to close temporarily. And a new fishing lure made famous by the pros has caught on here in Charleston, but it's not exactly legal in some areas. Newswatch's Allison Twaits has more on that story.
It's not your average fishing hook. It's called the Alabama rig, and right now it's got the fishing world hook on the 5-lure contraption that is causing one controversial thing in the fishing world. Casting a line these days is at a whole new level.
The fishing industry's never seen anything like it, and it's been one of the best things for the industry for a long time.
Instead of a single lure, the Alabama rig gives the appearance of a whole school of swimming fish, reeling in a whole lot of revenue for business owner Steve Ingram.
Have sold over 1,000 of them through the store and online.
But here's the problem. Some lakes, like those in Mattoon and Charleston, have limits to the number of hooks or lures per line, a regulation some feel should be thrown back.
I see no problem with using it. It just gives you more opportunities to catch more fish, and that's what we're all out there for, is to catch more fish.
There are some that, think, well, they shouldn't be allowed to use them in tournaments. It's 5 hooks, but it's a technique. You still have to, as an angler, do your homework to go find the fish, catch the fish.
But others say the lure is depleting stocks and taking the fun away from the sport. Anglers say that's not the case, and Illinois should look at changing the rules.
You know, and I'd like to see them just make it a flat, you can use it in the state of Illinois, so that way it's not confusing to the fishermen, and let's just fish and have fun.
And in a world where the job market is tight, one manufacturer is looking to expand. Simonton Windows in Paris is looking to hire nearly 70 more workers because of consolidation at other factories. Applicants need to be able to complete basic math skills and accurately read a tape measure. More information is available on our website at weiu.net. And speaking of jobs, it seems that some teenagers aren't having any problems finding one this summer. The U.S. government reports that 67,000 more teens have a job between the ages of 16 and 19 than they did in past years. Experts say while encouraging, the numbers aren't the sign of an easy job market for teens, but it's a step in the right direction. And on Tuesday, June 12th, shots will be fired, a helicopter will circle overhead, and sirens will sound at Eastern Illinois University. But don't be alarmed, it's all part of a state-level emergency exercise. This will be the first time this type of exercise has taken place on EIU's campus. Details of the exercise are being kept secret, but state officials say the event has taken about 2 years to plan. Members of local, regional, and state emergency organizations will participate in the exercise. And Neoga residents say the noise came out of nowhere on Tuesday and had many wondering if what they heard was a train or a plane. The answer is neither. Newswatch's Amanda Richardson has more.
It's quiet here now, but that wasn't the case Tuesday night. It was a whole lot of noise that has the whole town talking about what happened.
It sounded like a plane had crashed right on the other side of those trees, and it was just a roar, a really loud sound.
Neoga residents were startled by a loud noise that started about 7:30 Tuesday night and lasted until 9:45.
At first we thought it was a train, but it wasn't because the train's over there.
The noise is creating quite a stir in the local community and on websites like Facebook.
I've heard a lot of comments today of people coming through the stores. One guy said that his horses broke the fence and got loose.
But just what was that loud noise? Officials say the Trunkline Gas Company was doing maintenance work to replace valves on a natural gas pipeline. In order to finish the work, they had to get all of the gas out by releasing it into the air, and that's what caused the loud noise. The company says it's currently working on similar maintenance along a 100-mile line from Jacksonville, Illinois to Tuscola. Residents say they just wish they had a little notice about the work.
Why didn't they let anybody know they were going to do it?
The gas company says they can't warn everybody about maintenance work, but assures there was never any danger to area residents. In Neoga, I'm Amanda Richardson with WEIU Newswatch.
The company reports that the gas released into the air doesn't pose any threat to residents. They also say as work continues along the line, it's not uncommon to hear loud booms. And finally tonight, numbers released by the Coles County Sheriff's Office show that 52% of all the accidents in Coles County that they handled last year involved a deer. The reason why has officials a bit puzzled. We'll talk to Coles County Sheriff Darrel Cox and wildlife biologist Bryan Eubanks more about that in just a minute. But first, here's Newswatch's Andrew Benson with more.
There's probably a good chance you may know somebody who's hit a deer, at least in Coles County. And after spending the afternoon talking with police, we've got a pretty good idea of where drivers need to be careful. The Coles County Sheriff's Department is scratching their heads trying to figure out why there were more accidents involving deer in the county last year than ever before.
I can't say for sure. People that are live around this area know where the hot spots are for deer as far as where they cross the highways, but I couldn't give you a reason for the increase.
Wildlife biologist Bryan Eubanks knows where some of those hot spots are. But any roads near wooded areas have the potential to be hazardous.
One of them's just here by our office at the Twin Bridges that we see frequently. We see deer vehicle collisions, but also down by Lake Charleston along the Ambro River.
The Illinois Department of Natural Resources says the deer population is about the same in our area compared to previous years.
We don't really think that there's a big increase in the deer population just based on our harvest estimates. That's the only real indicator that we have for deer population size. And in the last 5 years, they've remained relatively constant between 1,500 and 1,700 deer taken per year.
That's a large number, but the herds are still out there, and they always run together.
If you see one on the road, there's more than that. So slow down. Deer whistles are a fad. They don't work. So other than just keeping your eye out in densely wooded areas along the highways, just be careful.
Wonder where we get our story inspirations from? Make sure to tune in to Newswatch every weeknight at 5:30 right here on WEIU to find out. Newswatch in Focus takes a local story from the week that was featured on Newswatch and goes more in depth. For more local news, weather, and sports, tune in to Newswatch every weeknight at 5:30. Welcome back. We're here with Sheriff Darrel Cox, Coles County Sheriff, and we're here with Bryan Eubanks. He is a wildlife biologist for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Really appreciate it. And we're here, of course, to talk about deer accidents, as we just saw the story on. So last year was a big year for deer accidents, it seems.
Yes, the Coles County Sheriff's Office has been keeping numbers on accidents since 2006. And last year, 2011, was the first year that over 50% of our accidents were with animals, predominantly deer.
Okay, and so was that like a steep increase from previous years, or was it just kind of steadily climbing?
You know, it's been close to 50% in years past. Last year, in 2010 it was 39%.
Okay.
And 2011 was the first year it actually went over that 50% mark and hit 52%.
Okay, so that's 50, just to clarify, that's 52% of all the accidents handled by the Sheriff's Department were with animals.
Correct.
Mostly deer.
The number was 131 deer car accidents.
That's a few. That's just
Yes.
a few. Okay, and there's not really a reason, is that right?
We don't have any particular data that shows that there's a cause for the accidents other than just, you know, motorists striking the deer that are in the roadway.
Okay, and so Bryan, that's, you know, it's not more deer?
Well, not necessarily, especially not in the last 5 years. Deer populations seem to remain relatively constant.
Okay, and what is the deer population around here? What does that look like?
So, I mean, it's expanded greatly over, say, the past 50 years. You know, it went from having virtually no deer around here to having several deer per square mile. But in the last 5 years, based on our harvest data, the population estimates are relatively stable.
Okay, and by harvest you mean what the hunters bring in?
Yeah, what the hunters take during the deer seasons. And it's remained relatively constant, ranging between 1,300 and 1,700 in the last 5 years.
Okay.
Although 2011 was our highest harvest in Coles County ever, with I think it was 1,658 deer taken in Coles County.
Okay, so it just really doesn't correlate with the...
Well, I mean, it makes sense because the hunters harvested more deer and people hit more deer because the population may have been a little higher. But whenever you start looking at statistically, that it's really just 50 deer here and there. It's not a huge difference of what we normally see.
Okay, so it's not like this big gigantic explosion of deer accidents or deer populations?
No, not.
Okay. And how do you get those estimates? I know there's like a specific way that you get how many deer we have around here.
I mean, in some counties up north, they'll actually do aerial surveys. So we use that as baseline data to compare, say, hunter effort compared to the number of deer that they actually kill during the deer seasons. So we know how many deer are up in those counties, and we can correlate that to counties throughout the state.
Okay.
So, but we use a lot of hunter data. So the number of hunters that go out, and then the number of deer that they take while they're out hunting.
Okay, and then there's a formula that's put into, and that's how you get your estimations. Okay, that sounds pretty simple. And if there aren't more deer, you know, and we don't really know the reason for the accidents, can we at least talk about some of the hot spots where these people happen to be seeing more deer and maybe why they're there?
I know this year we've handled 30, and predominantly most of them have been in the area of the Westfield Road and Illinois South Route 130. In years past, we take that data off from actually a pin map, and usually the deer car crashes occur in near wooded areas, near the Embraer River, highways in those areas where people don't have the reaction time to slow down to avoid striking the deer. In some crop areas, obviously, if they're standing corn on either side of the road, the motorist doesn't have the opportunity to see the deer and slow down before striking it, as opposed to let's say the crops for soybeans, where the deer,
you can see them coming, right? Okay, and you know, from your point of view, is it the same? You know, are you seeing them in those same areas?
Yeah, I mean, the areas that he just described are basically the best deer habitat around here.
Okay.
Whenever you get closer to rivers, creeks, they have wooded corridors, and that's where deer live. So, every time you see a major road cross a wooded area, there tend to be deer vehicle accidents.
Okay, and you know, with the deer vehicle accidents, is it because, you know, you would think the deer would hear the noise on the highway and maybe stay away from it? Is that not the case with deer?
I don't know. I think that sometimes they just get spooked and go the wrong way.
Okay.
Or don't know which way to go.
Same with other small animals.
And then, I mean, other times there's bucks chasing does or something like that, and they're not paying any attention. And that's when it causes some problems.
And since they happen to be in that habitat, that's just their neighborhood, really. So, okay, that makes sense. And so, what are the prime times of the year and of the day to be on the lookout for deer for motorists?
Well, I mean, during the rut or the deer breeding season is when we see most deer vehicle collisions in Illinois. I can't speak of numbers really, but usually November is when deer are most active. So around the month of November, and then throughout the year, they're most active at dawn and dusk.
Okay.
So,
is that when they're eating, feeding?
Yeah, I mean that's when they're most active, is at dawn and dusk. We call it crepuscular.
Okay.
So.
And does that seem to correlate with what you see accident-wise?
And that also correlates with farmers harvesting their crops, and that's when the deer in the standing corn lose that cover.
Okay.
So they move to other places, and then obviously during the rut or the mating season, the males travel extensive distances. I think they've been miles, as opposed to like in the summer months or spring, they don't really a couple square miles and they'll stay in that area. But during the rut and during the mating season, they travel extensively. Okay,
so you are seeing more then. What can drivers do to kind of reduce the risks of hitting a deer?
Obviously, I think that all of us should be aware of our surroundings and pay attention to what we're doing. I mean, we see a lot of accidents now with distracted drivers. And obviously, it's the cell phone.
Right.
So stay off your cell phone. Pay attention to what you're doing. But the big thing I tell people is don't leave the roadway to avoid striking a deer. You're far better off striking the deer than you are leaving the roadway and striking a utility pole or a culvert or sliding off in the ditch and actually overturning.
Okay.
The deer, I mean, obviously it's traumatic to most people when they strike a deer where they kill it or wound it, but it's far less damage. We can replace the car, but if you get thrown out in an overturned vehicle, then we're talking serious injury or death.
Okay, so is that kind of your advice as well? You'd say, go ahead and hit the deer if you have to. I mean, I know it's instinct. Everybody wants to slam on the brakes and get out of the way, but your advice would be to hit the deer.
If you have a chance to think about it, don't swerve.
There's plenty of deer population, have you told us? So
yeah, we'll be all right deer-wise.
They'll still be around, right? And another thing is deer whistles. We talked about this in the story, but that's not a thing, right? That's a fad.
I mean, from everything that I've read, they don't work. They can't prove that they work. Would you agree from what you've seen?
We put them on police cars back in the late 70s and early 80s, and we didn't see any change in our deer car crashes with our squad cars.
So the thinking was, they would make some noise that would drive the deer away, and that's just not true.
No.
Okay, so avoid the deer whistles. They don't do anything.
Yeah,
they aren't gonna.
Don't waste your money on
they aren't gonna help you out. Okay, well that's good to know. And are deer moving closer to urban areas?
Not necessarily. I mean, I know every year we get some calls here in Charleston of deer in neighborhoods or a doe with fawn in neighborhoods, but I don't think that they're necessarily being pushed into urban areas at a really high rate. I just think that they show up in different areas every year, and it's new to different neighborhoods.
Do you ever see accidents in more urban areas? Do you ever have to handle those?
Not so much, because usually in urban areas people are driving a lot slower. And the reaction time's a lot better.
Okay. So if you do hit a deer, what should you do?
If there's any damage to your vehicle, you need to call 911. Obviously, if you're injured, you'd want to call 911. If the car's movable, we ask that you pull off the side of the road so you don't cause a secondary accident or crash, and wait for an officer to get there if possible. If the car is not damaged extensively and is drivable, and you feel like you want to drive home and then report the accident later, that's fine too. Normally, we have anywhere between 2 and 3 patrolmen covering 500 square miles, so our response time can be 15, 20 minutes or more. So if the car is drivable and the driver wishes to go home, that's not a problem, and then report it.
Is it something they have to report? If you hit a deer, do you have to report it?
If the damage is, I don't know what the statute is with hitting the deer, but I know that you have to have $1,000 worth of damage to your vehicle before you're required to report that damage.
Okay.
Most insurance companies would require their customers to report any damage like that, whether it's less than $1,000 or more.
Okay. And what about from your standpoint, hitting deer? Is it a requirement? Do they need to report it to you?
No, you don't have to report it if you hit it. If you want to take the animal, like if it's salvageable or parts of it are salvageable for food, then that is required to report it. So ensure that people aren't poaching deer and then claiming that they hit them with a car. So if you want to take that deer, then you can call a number, or you can get on our website and fill it in on the DNR website, and you can take that deer home.
Okay.
If another motorist hits it and they don't want it, then somebody else can
take
do it. So, but if you hit the deer, I guess you have the first chance at the road kill. Yes.
Okay. What do you do if you hit a deer and it's wounded? You know, it's in the middle of the road, you've hit it, now what?
Call the sheriff.
Normally we come and we dispatch the deer. We shoot the animal and put it out of its misery so it's not suffering.
So don't manage that yourself?
It's illegal.
It's illegal?
You still can't shoot a deer even if it's wounded, and so definitely get a hold of law enforcement and they'll take care of it.
Okay. Well, that's good advice. I think a lot of people, you know, you hit a deer and you think, now what do I do? It's hurt and you're scared. You've just hit the deer, so call 911. That's your best bet. Okay. What's the typical procedure for a deer accident? Like when a sheriff's car rolls up on the accident, how does it work?
Well, obviously the first thing is, you know, treat for injuries. If there are not any injuries, we want to move off the roadway to stop a secondary crash from occurring. And when we take the license information, insurance information, we complete a traffic crash report. That report is generated through the Illinois Department of Transportation. We complete those reports. If the deer is there, you know, we make sure it's out of the roadway. If it's wounded, we dispatch it. If the person wants the deer, then we have to call, or they have to call DNR and make arrangements to get a permit so they can actually take the roadkill.
Okay.
And then it's up to the motorist to contact their insurance carrier and go from there.
Okay. And what happens to deer that are hit, you know, and killed instantly on the side of the roadway? Is that now then moved over to the state of Illinois to pick up? Is that or is it by county?
Usually the DOT picks them up. They're on state highways. We don't get very many deer car accidents on the secondary roads because the speeds aren't great enough to where, you know, they have enough reaction time to slow down. So most of the car crashes with deer are on state maintained roadways, highways like Illinois Route 16, a few on I-57,
okay,
Route 130, those kind of places.
Sure. Okay. And have you ever had any unique cases involving deer? I know from time to time we hear stories.
I had one that I'll never forget. I've been a patrolman since the late 70s. I'm dating myself, but I was responded to a call of an attempted murder. A lady had told me that someone had shot at her while she was driving down the road, and the ambulance was there, and she hadn't been shot actually, but the window had broken and there was glass in her hair, and the ambulance crew was trying to get that glass out of her hair, and I think she might have had a piece of glass in her eye. And I went out and looked at the car, and on the back of the bumper I saw a big clump of deer hair, and then I determined, well, nobody actually tried to fire a weapon and shoot her while she was driving down the road. She had a deer accident, so I went back, and I didn't know if I could convince her of that. Sure. She was pretty convinced that somebody shot at her. So I went back into the house and I asked her to come out, and her and actually one of the ambulance crew came out, and they kind of backed up the situation there where, oh yeah, that's deer hair, and you've had a deer struck the side of your car and that's what broke your window.
Oh wow. You hear that a lot, you know, a deer will clip the back or side of a car, and some people don't even know what's happened, you know, and so a lot of that probably goes unreported. Sure. But anything with you, any strange deer tales that you've ever had? I mean, since we're talking about deer.
Not particularly.
Occasionally you hear about them wandering into buildings or things like that. You know, I guess that's just, animals are animals.
Right, I've heard several of those stories, but I haven't ever actually
seen it.
One myself.
Any other interesting ones from you that involve deer? That was just the best one. Attempted murder by deer, huh? That's definitely a new one for me. So, well, since there are sometimes, you know, increases in accidents, do we ever offer an extended hunting season that kind of corresponds with trying to reduce accidents?
Yeah, actually. He was just talking about how they fill out a crash report that's reported to the Department of Transportation. And so every year when we're setting these deer hunting regulations, that's something that we take into account.
Okay.
So in areas that have high rates of deer collisions, which is just basically the number of deer accidents versus the number of vehicles that drive through that area, then in areas that have a certain rate of that, we allow a late antlerless season to help control the doe population so it'll help reduce deer densities in that given county.
Okay, and so are there any other factors that you take into consideration as well?
Well, it's again a harvest rate issue. We take harvest rates, how many hunters go out versus how many deer that are taken whenever we're considering the number of tags that we're going to allocate for the next hunting season.
Okay.
So those are our two main factors.
And I assume that deer populations and maybe even accidents, is that something that the IDNR tracks on occasion just to?
I mean, that's something that we always keep into consideration because I mean, that's what we do. We monitor populations. We want to try to keep deer at a healthy level to where there are plenty of them out there for people to enjoy watching and hunting and things like that. But we want to make sure that they don't get to a level to where they're eating all of everybody's crops or they're running into everybody's vehicles. And so
being dangerous.
It's trying to maintain that balance between people and deer. That's a big part of our job.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you gentlemen coming in today and bringing the deer issues into focus for us per se. So I'm Kate Pleasant. That's all the time we have for this week's show. I hope you'll tune in next for the Four Rivers Ag Report with Fred Peralta. Until next week, thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in to Newswatch in Focus. Is there a news story happening in your community? Let us know about it. You can email our newsroom at news@weiu.net. Call us at 581-2911 or write to us at 600 Lincoln Avenue, Charleston, Illinois 61920. Your story could be featured on Newswatch or right here on this show, Newswatch in Focus. For more news all the time, visit our website at weiu.net. Thanks for watching.